Let's roll. This is Countercharge, your podcast for ranks, flanks, and kings of war. Join your hosts as they delve into the world of Panithor and bring you worldwide coverage of all things Kings of War.
Welcome to Countercharge. I'm Alex Gordon.
I'm Rob Enough.
And I am Jeremy Duvall. We are super excited to have a new recent communications team member extraordinaire from Mantic, Mr. Alex Gordon. How are you doing, Alex?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm very well, thank you. Very excited to be here. Really happy to be on Countercharge. I've been a long-time listener of the show, so it's a real honor to be appearing as a guest.
Well, we love to have you. What is it, Rob? A long-time listener, first-time caller, right? From the old talk radio days, right?
That's right.
But we're super excited to have Alex on the show. We're going to hear a lot about what's going on at Mantic, new exciting stuff, a lot of really fantastic things happening at Mantic. And we'll also get into Alex's backstory, sort of find how he, as he mentioned, transitioned from a customer of Mantic into working for them. But first, why don't we go around the horn? We'll do a little hobby update, see what everyone's been up to before we get into hearing more from Alex. So, Rob, what have you been up to hobby-wise?
Not much lately. Work's been busy, but I'm waiting for Mike to print me some of the new salamanders, so I want to add a bunch of stuff to my salamander army. So we got the Blue Sea Brawl coming up in March. Turns out I don't have time to do a new army for that, so Dan and I are working up what we're going to use from existing armies. So I'll probably, ogres are still pretty good, right?
So no custom book terrain basing this year theme?
An edition change kind of screws that up.
Oh, yeah.
It takes like 6 to 9 months to do something like that. If you have an edition change coming, you sort of stall, you sort of stop. You want to wait and see what happens. And even now, Jeremy, we're sort of still in a transition. We just launched forth. Things are going to evolve. Armies are going to change. Points are going to adjust. I'm hesitant to dive really deep into something, but I have something in the works. Been pulling models out for that. But how about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, so I've been having a lot of fun with my Bamboo H2S 3D printer that I got over the holidays. So that's been a big thing. I reprinted all of the terrain that I had purchased off of Etsy. So I reprinted it all on my Bamboo for my Ice Elf themed Northern Alliance. And what I'm suffice it to say is that guy, man, that Etsy guy took me around the neighborhood.
If we would have just bought the printer and the filament, you probably would have saved like what, a few $100?
Oh yeah, it's just crazy because I can tell I printed it on like high quality, so like 0.04, I think. I take what I printed and also too, mine's like a brand new printer, right? So who knows what he was printing on as far as quality? But once it's primed, to me it almost looks as good as resin. Pretty close. Like you cannot find layer lines on it. So that's been really exciting, getting the Northern Alliance ready. So I printed out essentially the whole shebang, and that took a while because each piece to print, since I was printing it at higher quality, was like 5 to 6 hours, 7 hours maybe. So I've been working on that. I've also been using the 3D printer for a lot of board game stuff, like box inserts, are containers for different board games, like pieces for different board games, just like pimping out a lot of my board games, which has been super exciting. And I've started with those basing materials. I've got my bases pretty much ready for my custom Hearthguard for Northern Alliance. I'm really excited with that. As a reminder, I took the Half-Elf Berserkers, the Ice Naiad kit, and the old Mantic Elf Spearman kit and did like a complete custom mashup for my Hearthguard, so they're like heavily armored elves. So excited for those guys.
Yeah, on the Ice Elemental front, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Clive Stone went a little crazy. So Nick Holder on the Mantic Vault Fanatics page took the Ice Elemental and made alternate versions, different poses. And now they're on the Vault.
Great idea.
This is really another good example of Mantic really embracing a really great idea and just letting it run. Super excited if that's the first. I've seen a lot of other stuff.
So one thing I haven't tried, Rob, the thought of printing a miniature on a filament printer used to be like crazy talk. But now I'm wondering for these larger miniatures at the highest detail, maybe it will be okay. I don't know, but I haven't messed with that. So mostly just terrain, board game bits.
Well, you're on the slope now, so at some point you'll be getting a resin printer anyways.
Oh, probably
right?
will be.
Yeah.
I mean, 3D printing is like the most fun, and it also gives me an excuse to like go into the garage and have some Jeremy time. I love my family, but it's like I got to go into the garage for a few minutes to check the 3D printer. I'll be back. So it's an excuse to find that some peace and quiet. But what about you, Alex? You know, we'll probably get more into your gaming story, but I see in the background of your camera what looks to me as a miniature shelf. So are you a hobbyist? Do you enjoy the hobby, or where do you sort of fall on that paradigm?
Absolutely, Jeremy. I'm definitely a hobbyist. I love it. This hobby has many different aspects, right? There's the modeling and painting side, there's the gaming side, there's the social side. I consider myself like a big fan of all of those aspects of the hobby. I kind of love the way it all comes together in the end as well when you're actually having a game. You know, you've painted your miniatures, you've put the work in, and then you're enjoying a game and, you know, with a friend and kind of good times with good people. We might talk about this a little bit later, but I'm kind of on the brink of moving house at the moment. Things are being packed up in boxes, you know, a bit stressful. Anyone who's ever moved house, I'm sure knows that, yeah, that'll put a dampener on your hobby progress for a while. But I am actually just kicking off a new project. And Rob just alluded to that there, but we have a bit of a slow grow initiative coming up, which we're going to talk about more later. And I've just got started with the new army that I'm going to be building for that. So that's my recent sort of hobby.
One of the easiest things, and something we always recommend to people who are struggling trying to find time to hobby or do hobby, is if you can have a space that your hobby stuff is set up all the time, or that's relatively set up all the time. It's difficult to hobby if you're having to bring out everything each time you want to hobby and then put it all back when you're done. And there's lots of ways you can do that. We've done stuff, right, Rob? TV trays are different things you can do to try to have a hobby space set up. But yeah, that is a big challenge when you have to move and you got to put up all that stuff. When real life gets in the way of the important things of toy soldiers, right?
That's one of my least favorite things, when real world responsibilities get in the way of me playing with toy soldiers. It's like, what? That's not fair.
What you say resonates with me. Me and Rob talk about the gaming triangle, right? On one side, you have the hobby. On the other side, you have the community. On the other side, then you have the actual game itself, the playing, the strategic game of it, right? Rob and I are both sort of in the milieu. The vein of you is that we enjoy all aspects of the game, from the hobby to the playing to the community. Some people come to that love at different times of their life, right? I still remember when I was in a game store as a wee little tyke of maybe, I don't know what, it's 7 or 8, and I saw the first ever, that classic Space Marine box from Rogue Trader, which was the first miniature box I ever bought. Was gaming and miniatures something that you had from an early age? Did you find your love of the hobby like later in life? Talk to us a little bit about that first aha moment when you're like, oh, miniature gaming or tabletop gaming, this is something I want to be involved in.
I'm a long time miniature hobbyist and gamer for sure. I'm a child of the early 80s, so I'm in my early 40s now. And I think I've been into it all since I was about 10 years old. So probably pretty similar to you, Jeremy, I think. I mean, I remember building kind of model aircraft kits and things as a kid. Like my dad kind of got me started on that sort of stuff fairly young. And my dad was also a fan of board games. He wasn't a miniature gamer himself, but, you know, he's a fan of board games. So I think doing a bit of modeling and also playing some form of tabletop was part of my early childhood. I think probably when I was about, 8, 9, maybe 10, I remember seeing an advert for Space Crusade on TV. I don't know if, you know, Jeremy, you're nodding. Yeah, if you remember that one. And I was kind of hooked the moment I saw that, and I pestered my parents, and I got given it for, can't remember if it was a birthday present or a Christmas present, but yeah, got Space Crusade, started playing it, pretty much was hooked from then on. I think it's funny as well, looking back now, how Space Crusade was as if you look at it through an adult's eyes, it was an obvious gateway product. But when you're a kid, you don't really think about that. You just think, oh, this cool, you know, cool miniatures, this cool board game. And yeah, basically the gateway tactic just absolutely worked on me. And I think I never looked back after Space Crusade.
Yeah, we played a lot of Space Crusade, Space Hulk, Tyranid Attack, all those games in the early 90s. And every gamer kid will understand this. It's like my buddy's 10th birthday or 11th birthday. So his dad rented a house at the beach near where we live for him to have a sleepover birthday party, right? We all get there. We're at this beach house, and he got Tyranid Attack for his birthday. So he plays that out, and we're like, yes, we're at the beach, but we're going to game. And his dad is like watching us. He's like, go outside. What are you doing? And we're like, okay, I'm going to fire at your guy with my +3 bolt thorn and rolling my dice. And we had no interest at all to go out on the beach. We wanted to play those board games because those really were a great entry point, because you didn't need to buy a whole army. Everything was contained. Space Crusade, Space Hulk, Tyranid Attack, all those games were so much fun that I hear it. Those were a good, like you say, the gateway drug, into the wider hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said there really resonates with me, Jeremy, as well. Just kind of, I remember, sleepovers, that kind of thing, doing hobby stuff, playing games. It's like, those are probably some of the happiest memories of my life, I think. And I think all that stuff has really stayed with me. In terms of my story, so after Space Crusade, I went on and got into most of the major GW systems when I was a teenager. Again, that was back in the 90s, so there was lots of stuff coming out. I really liked both the fantasy and the sci-fi sides of things. Looking back, I think the games I actually played the most of was probably Warhammer 40k 3rd edition. I was old enough to actually have the 2nd edition box set, the famous one with like the cardboard dreadnought in it. 3rd edition, when they kind of rebooted it, that was when I really played quite a lot. And then I also played quite a lot of Mordheim, which was a, really fun game as well. And I think actually I kind of wanted to play Warhammer Fantasy Battle, but it was always like a bit too big of a task for me as a teenager to actually build and paint an army for that, because it, required quite a lot of models. And I remember I was trying to collect dwarves and I had like a couple of units painted, but I could never quite follow through to get a whole army done.
Hearing about Games Workshop TV commercial to us in the US, we're like, oh my, but you're in the home country. You start with the GWs, like the meat and potatoes. What sort of prompted that transition into playing maybe other game systems Rob and I often talk, we're in the golden age of gaming right now. So many great gaming companies. And I think that's why, since the competition is so high, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that later on in the episode, but there's a lot of great quality game systems and products. What was that first sort of outside piece of candy that pulled you away from GW, or how did the bigger world of gaming sort of get on your radar?
Yeah, great question, Jeremy. And that's kind of, that's like the next chapter of my story. And I think what I'm about to say probably is very familiar, but I did a lot of, talking about the old GW stuff when I was a teenager. And then really I fell out of the hobby when I went to university, kind of through my 20s. I think that's a time in your life, a lot of the time, you just have other priorities and, moving around, traveling back and forth between university and home, and graduate from university. And I personally went and actually lived in Japan for a few years after university. And so all of the hobby stuff just kind of got forgotten. I never really fell out of love with it. I think I always missed it on some level. It was always still there for me in the back of my mind. And once I was kind of in my mid 30s, life a little bit more settled and just living in one place. And I had that kind of hankering to get back into it. So I started looking at what was out there. And obviously by this point, it's probably about 2017, 2018. And just the landscape looked very different. I think, again, like you talked about, Jeremy, back in the day, GW in some ways was like the only game in town. And I think the industry changed a lot. And suddenly you had all these different options. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was, but I naturally gravitated towards Mantic games at that point when I came back in. And I felt like, in a way, sort of like Mantic struck me as a company that had a soul. The spirit of what I loved back in the 90s and what had captured my imagination back then as a child, somehow it felt like Mantic had that spirit and they were kind of doing, a similar kind of thing. And I just was naturally kind of drawn to Mantic. So at that point, hadn't done anything in quite a while, and actually got back into it with Dungeon Saga, the dungeon crawler board game, the not Origins, the more recent one, but the first Dungeon Saga. Really, really enjoyed that. And I think it was like a big turning point for me was the point where I managed to get my, then girlfriend, now wife, into the hobby with me. She had never seen anything like that before. She didn't know that miniature gaming existed or anything, but she is quite artsy. So she'd done quite a lot of arts and crafts. And the idea of painting miniatures really appealed to her. She's also, she likes geeky stuff. She likes fantasy, that kind of thing. So it wasn't too big a leap. And she was like, oh, yeah, if you're going to be painting these Dungeon Saga miniatures, I'm happy to sort of help. So we did that. It was a really nice thing to do together. We painted the whole set of Dungeon Saga, played the game, invited friends around, started playing the game. And I'd say that was like the start of my big, like my own personal kind of hobby renaissance, if you see what I mean. And yeah, as I said, then girlfriend, now wife, I would definitely say the couple that paints together stays together, because that's, it's a really, really nice thing to do with a partner if you're lucky enough, like I am, to have a partner who's open to it.
Thinking back to when you were talking about your GW days, you're looking up at that fantasy battle game like, oh, I would love to have hundreds of painted models. But that was young Alex. So now you're sitting there playing Dungeon Saga. How do you finally make that leap into a mass ranks and flanks fantasy game like Kings of War?
I think getting back into Dungeon Saga, it was really kind of scratching that hobbying itch again. Back when I was a teenager, I never quite managed to build a full army for Warhammer Fantasy. And I think I felt like I had some unfinished business to some extent. I had this urge to play like a proper fantasy war game. Now, of course, at this point, Mantic are fully on my radar, and I see they have this game, Kings of War, and it looks great. And actually, the only thing really holding me back at that point was that at the time, I wasn't aware of anyone else locally playing. And as many people do in Europe, we live in quite a small apartment. And I looked at Kings of War and it was like, even if I could, we don't have room for a 6 foot by 4 foot gaming table in our apartment. I'm like, it's kind of out of the question. And this was back around 2020, 2021-ish. And I think at the time, there was the pandemic happening and stuff as well. And there was loads and loads of really interesting hobby content coming out on YouTube. And I saw a few videos about people playing Kings of War in 10mm scale. I think there was one especially from, it was a guy called Luke, and was Geek Gaming Scenics. I don't know if you remember him.
We had him on for an episode. Yeah, good guy.
I've never met him personally. He's always struck me as a really, really nice guy. Used to really enjoy his channel. And he did a video in particular where he was like playing Kings of War, but shrinking everything down to 10mm scale. And that really captured my imagination. And suddenly I was like, oh, that could work. If I'm playing on a 3x2 instead of a 6x4, then we can fit it in the apartment. And the smaller miniatures will be kind of quicker and easier to paint as well. That was my somewhat unconventional route into Kings of War, like through 10mm. And we got into that. Luckily, again, my wife really actually was up for that idea. So she built an army of 10mm elves. I built an army of 10mm orcs. That was how we got started. We started playing with, games against each other, sort of roped in a few friends as well. So we had more armies to play against. And then between about 2021 and 2024, we were just very happily doing that. At some point, I found out there actually was a group of people in Frankfurt playing Kings of War, got in touch with them. And, there was like, there's a store where they go along. There's Kings of War happening every Tuesday. Got involved with that and started building kind of my first 28mm army for Kings of War. So that was that's my potted history of being a Kings of War player. And I would definitely say that, now, I like fantasy and I like sci-fi, and I'm pretty much interested in every game Mantic makes, but Kings of War is my favorite for sure.
From your accent, I think we can all tell you're from the UK, but you don't reside there now. So give us a story of strapping young lad coming out of university, doesn't stay in the UK. He goes abroad. What about that life story?
I was really interested in languages, and I was more on the sort of arts and humanities side when I was young rather than sciences. And I ended up studying Japanese studies at university, went and lived in Japan for a few years. Did that for a few years, moved back to the UK, but then ended up moving to Germany for a job kind of working in the video games industry, actually, which was sort of through, I got basically through my kind of Japanese language skills for what they were worth. Sort of that brings us up to kind of where we are now, I suppose, where I've been living and working in Germany for about 12 years at this point, and met my, now wife. We decided she's also not German. So we've both been living, like I met her at the company I was working for. Germany's a lovely place. Don't get me wrong. We have a nice life here, but it's not really home for either of us. So the last couple of years we've been thinking about, could we maybe move back to England? She's not British either. She's Bulgarian actually, but she's open to moving to England, and that was kind of our idea. We're going to move back to England. We're going to settle in England. That was the context where I was sort of looking for jobs back in England. And last year, an opening came up at Mantic. I applied for it.
What was that hiring process look like? Obviously, you probably had to do a couple interviews. Do you think, like, being a fan of Mantic, were you able to sort of, I imagine that was a nice little tool you could use during the interview process, is not only having that marketing background, but being a player of Mantic games too. Did you use that as like kind of like a strategy when you were going through the interview process?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I wouldn't say I necessarily used it as a strategy. I think because I just genuinely am a fan of Mantic, and I have been for quite a few years now, and I love Mantic games. I love what they do. I love kind of what the company stands for. I think that meant I didn't need strategies in a way. I kind of was just like, I'm just going to be myself in the interviews. I can't speak to it too much more than that. You might have to ask Ronnie why he hired me.
Why he liked you.
Yeah. Yeah. If he likes me, I don't know. Yeah. Does he? No, I'm joking. So that was that really. I felt like maybe I was kind of just in the right place at the right time, and I had the right profile for what they were looking for, if you see what I mean.
I know Rob does a lot of hiring. I do a lot of hiring in my job. When you're a hiring manager, you can tell when someone is authentic and when someone has opened up the book of work speak and is just trying to tell you all the adverbs. I think that's just a good skill for you guys out there in your job searching. Just be true to who you are. Is being someone in marketing, someone who had kind of a gaming career adjacent to both sides of this coin. So we're going to start with the positivity side of the coin, because sort of our guiding light here on Countercharge. But going into your interview before you started working at Mantic, what do you think Mantic did well as a company, like within this space? Is there anything that sort of rises to the surface as a customer and sort of working in the field? What do you think Mantic does well?
Now that I'm a Mantic employee, I'll have to be careful about how I answer. I don't want to get into trouble with Ronnie. For me, I think Mantic have a pretty clear mission of making miniature wargaming fun and accessible. I mean, I can tell you what I love about Kings of War pretty much applies to all Mantic games. Kings of War is the kind of game where once you've played it a handful of times, you don't need to be stuck with your nose in the rule book when you're playing. You get the hang of it, and then when you're playing, you're not having to consult the rules all the time. The rules are just kind of clean and simple, and like they get out of the way. And what that facilitates, in my opinion, is just like it's a better experience. When you're at the table, you're focusing on having fun and trying to outwit your opponent. Or if you're a narrative gamer, you're focusing on like the story that is being told at the table, and you're not having to break every 5 minutes to look up a rule. And it's sort of, that can be quite immersion breaking. And I think that, among many other things, but that's probably the one thing that really stands out to me as something that Mantic do extremely well. It's like when you're playing a Mantic game, you're having like a positive, nice, fun experience at the table above all else.
No, I agree with you. One of the great aspects of Mantic is sort of that community aspect, right? Of building those relationships and incorporating that into how the game systems work, and just like the culture of Mantic, I think is very player positive.
Yeah.
As you're going through this interview process and getting ready to start in Mantic, oftentimes I think it's good when you're applying for a position somewhere to have in mind maybe some of the challenges that company faces, or even start thinking about where do I want to hit the ground running? Because when you hire someone new, if you can leverage their skill right off the bat and get them working right away, I think that's a great quality to have in a new employee. So was there something in your mind that you're like, oh man, if I worked for Mantic, I would love to work on this, or maybe they could be a little bit better in this area, or this is going to be my quest, my starter quest once I get to the village of Mantic. So in your mind, what was sort of you thinking, like the areas that you think were ripe for you to sink your claws in now that you've sort of started working at Mantic?
I love the starter quest analogy. And now I really feel like I'm on countercharge now as well. Now that, we're about 40 minutes in to recording, Jeremy's bringing out the analogies. I think a big challenge probably for any company, be it gaming or anything else really, but probably especially gaming, is I think one of Mantic's big strengths is the loyal kind of player base and loyal customer base they have. But from a kind of communications perspective, it's how do you make sure that what you're saying is also reaching new people and you're not just kind of talking to the existing customer base all the time? I mean, don't get me wrong. Talking to existing customers is really important for any business, as you guys know as well. But it's kind of how can you get that message out there even wider? I don't want to kind of talk about the job too much today. It's very, very early days for me. I only just started in December and we've had the Christmas holidays in between, and I'm still only really on about week 6 of actual work. So it is very early days, but I think Ronnie's given me the brief really of, essentially my job is to kind of spread the word about all the cool things that Mantic are doing. I think also an aspect of that is shining a spotlight on cool stuff that's already happening out there in the community, and cool armies that people are painting and cool games that people are setting up and all of that kind of thing. So having a community element as well. And then, then the third aspect is sort of reaching new people and putting Mantic in front of more eyeballs. And I think, that's the brief that Ronnie's given me. So that's kind of what I'm going to be working on. As I said, it's early days yet. Please be patient with me. But I'm just kind of looking at all aspects of that and thinking about what are all the kind of options and all the tools for achieving those goals, really.
Rob, I think that's a really great charter for a position, because I think we've had elements in that in Mantic. Obviously, we had all the stuff Kyle did with Mastercrafted, but he's also has his sales and game developer hats on, right, too. And then we had some stuff with Andy, where he did some great stuff, but maybe, not as much as we had hoped or, facilitated. But it really feels like Mantic has needed that one sort of PPOC, primary point of contact, who is the Mantic communication czar. A lot of people have worn that hat at Mantic, right, Rob? But I think having one that we know who to go for all that stuff, I think is a great idea.
Ronnie is a great salesman. Probably not the best HR person. I think that's maybe something that's plagued them a little bit over time, is that they sort of had these things and it was a lot of role ambiguity, who's supposed to do what. Now it's much cleaner. I think, Alex, coming in, you have an articulated vision of what you're supposed to be doing. For those that haven't met Ronnie, what is one thing that surprised you about Ronnie Renton?
That's a minefield of a question, Rob. To be honest, so I am still living in Germany now, right? This is the thing. I'm actually kind of in the process. I started working at Mantic in December. Andy left quite a while ago, so they'd been a man down for quite a while, and they were very keen for me to start as early as I could, but I did have to hand my notice in at my previous job, and then my wife also needed to hand her notice in, so we've had this, it's been a bit of a drawn out process. As things stand, we're still living in Germany now. So I've been doing my first couple of months remotely, but I've been over to Nottingham a few times to meet everyone in person. And that was meeting Ronnie for the first time when he was my boss. That was the first time I met him in person. I'd never met him at an event or anything like that before. Find him really, really friendly. It maybe not surprising, but I guess I'd wondered, will I be a bit intimidated? He's the CEO of the company and he's a very public face. He has quite a high profile. And I wondered, will he be a bit intimidating in person? But absolutely not. He's super friendly and he's made me feel very, very welcome and kind of put me at my ease. So that's been really nice, actually. And I genuinely mean that. I'm not kind of just saying that because I have to,
I think anyone who's met Ronnie knows he can disarm your apprehension in half a second. Well, you'll meet him and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the CEO of a company. And then next thing you know, you're about soccer or something, you know what I mean? And I think that's what makes him such a great salesman, is that he can just sort of put you at ease really fast, and his passion is infectious. And I don't know, Rob, there's not a lot of game companies, and I always say this, one of my like elevator pitches for Mantic, there's not a lot of game companies where people play the game where like a big chunk of the players have a story about when they were hanging out or meeting the president of the company. A lot of Kings of War players or Mantic players have that because of how engaged Ronnie is.
He's a character. Alex, you won't take credit for this, but I just think your presence has already made an impact, because I think we were talking off air. I mean, this Q&A session that he had in Australia, it was the most coherent. I mean, I could understand him, but I didn't even have to slow it down.
The only time I've ever heard him that relaxed is at the hot tub at Scott Holcomb's house during Riddle of Steel, when he's had a couple of pints and he's relaxed in the spa, and then he'll slow down. So it was like Spa Ronnie, I felt, in Australia.
We're going to chalk that up to Alex's presence.
Alex, you can take all of the credit, but yet you can also say, well, I've only been here a couple of weeks if anything bad happens. So you're actually now in the sweet spot where any change is due to you, but any bad thing is like, well, I'm just getting started, guys. You got to give me some time to get the ball rolling here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, how long can we extend that sweet spot for? 6 months, a year, maybe?
You're like, can this just be my life here at Mantic?
One thing I'm curious about, though, obviously you moved from large gaming company to a much smaller gaming company. Maybe too early to know the difference, but like, what do you feel are the challenges to move to a small company? And then flip side, what are the benefits of working with a smaller company?
Yeah, for people who don't know, sort of my previous job was with Nintendo. So obviously much bigger company. I mean, in fact, actually, Nintendo's like not that big. They're kind of like, globally speaking, I think they're much smaller than like Microsoft or Sony actually. But Nintendo, very unique company, very well-known brand. Working for them was an amazing experience. And Mantic is way smaller. So it's a much smaller company, and it's a different industry, really. So it is very, very different. And again, it's early days. I was at Nintendo for quite a long time, and I've really only just started. I've only just got my foot through the door at Mantic. So a little bit too early to say maybe. But one thing I would say is, in a bigger company, so my role at Nintendo was probably more like, it was a bit narrower, There's like, for every different function you can think of, there's a whole team to take care of it. Whereas at Mantic, obviously, much smaller company, you wear more different hats, and you kind of like, right, if I'm involved in marketing, I'm involved in like every different aspect of that. And already, for example, I've been writing blogs and writing newsletters and things like that, which I didn't do in my previous role. And you asked about positives and negatives, Robs, and I think it's like, well, that's both, it's kind of, it makes things a bit hectic, but at the same time, it's really varied and enjoyable. And like, so far at Mantic, I'm really enjoying the work, and I'm learning a lot as well because I'm doing lots of different things.
Those opportunities to wear multiple hats, though, is a great opportunity for personal growth. Trying things you haven't done before. If I only could do one thing, I would get bored of that really quick. So the opportunity to reach into other areas that are tangential to what I'm doing, it makes the job a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick commercial break. And on the other side, we want to really jump into Mantic's upcoming Slow Grow Challenge.
I'm Ronnie from Mantic Games, and you're listening to Countercharge.
And we are back. So one of the exciting things we have Alex to talk about, and I think it's so timely, it's so appropriate when a new edition comes out, right, Rob? Very much the spirit of this new edition, of 4th edition, of wanting to bring new players in. We've had some recent interviews. We've been really trying to expand our coverage, interviewing new players, first-time voices to Countercharge. I know Mantic is getting ready, as you guys have heard already, do a slow grow challenge. Before we get into the details, maybe riff without the T on that idea of how important a slow grow league is to building new players, and especially around this sort of new revamped or revolution of Kings of War 4th edition.
We just talked about what my kind of brief from Ronnie is for my job within Mantic. The slow grow is a good example of the kind of thing I'm going to be working on. Definitely not only this kind of thing, but for now, this is one of the kind of projects that I'm getting to sink my teeth into. As you say, Jeremy, with 4th edition coming out, it's a perfect time, especially like it's the new year as well. It's like new edition, new year, new army, that sense of new beginnings. And I think, so just to briefly say kind of what we're aiming to do with it. So we're calling it, the Kings of War Slow Grow Army Building Challenge. It's kicking off in February. We're going to be blogging about it. And I think as this Countercharge episode goes out, we'll have probably the first one or maybe two episodes of the blog will be live on the Mantic website. So for all listeners, please do go and have a look at that because there'll be more details there. But essentially, the idea is, so starting from scratch, the goal is to build and paint a Kings of War army and to do it in bite-sized chunks, which, I'm sure that's not necessarily a new concept to anyone who's listening. How we're going to break it up is we want to do it in 4 stages of 6 weeks. So it's 24 weeks in total. So if you were to start like kind of where we're starting now, from February, that will take you through to about July. And that time frame actually segues perfectly because in July, I mean, I can't really say much detail about it now, but there's a plan to have a big kind of participation campaign again this summer where people can play and people can upload their results to a website, and then everyone has the chance to kind of have a say in the future of Panethor. So if you're starting now from scratch and you kind of follow along with the challenge, you can go from not having an army to having a fully painted 2,000 point army by the summer, and you can play in the summer campaign if you want to. So 4 stages of 6 weeks. In each of those 6-week stages, the goal is to paint about 500 points. And I think another thing we want to put across is that in 2026 now, with 4th edition and with Kings of War Champions existing, there are multiple routes into Kings of War. If you're starting out new, there are multiple different on-ramps, and you can start with Champions if you like. Start off by painting a Champions company and playing a few games of Champions, and then you can actually expand that into a Kings of War army. Or if you prefer just to go straight into Kings of War, you can, for example, start off with, say, 500 points as an ambush force and expand that then again to a 1,000 point ambush force. And the idea is that the final destination is having a 2,000 point painted army for Kings of War, but there's a few different ways you can get there. On the blog, we'll have 4 members of Team Mantic. So myself and 3 other guys from Mantic will be doing this challenge ourselves. We're going to be blogging. The goal is to blog once a week for the whole 24 weeks. And we're going to be updating everyone on our progress. And actually of the 4 of us, 2 of us are starting for stage 1. Instead of doing a 500 point like ambush force, we're starting with Champions boxes. And then 2 guys are starting with kind of like just 500 points of ambush. So we want to kind of demonstrate that there's multiple ways you can get into it, if that makes sense.
So to kind of recap, Alex, the particulars is 24 weeks, February to July. You basically have 4 sections of 6 weeks. 500 points is what you're targeting per section. That's pretty organized. This must be something you brought to the table, because this is a level of sophistication I've not always seen. So I'm very excited.
Thanks, Rob. The idea of a slow grow and the idea of it's kind of a bit of a tale of 4 gamers type vibe to it. None of that is super original, but the exact details of the timeline, etc., is something that I put together. One thing I would like to say as well is kind of, obviously, that's the timeline that we're going to be doing it on. We as Team Mantic, and the idea is we sort of lead the community in it. Obviously, we'd love to get you guys involved. We'd love to get Countercharge listeners involved. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But one thing I just want to say as well is, like, we know that everyone's not living on the same timeline, and if for anyone who's already started painting their new army for 4th edition, or for anyone who maybe arrives at this a bit late, you can still get involved and you can still paint your army and you can still join in with the Slow Grow Challenge, even if you're not quite on the same timeline as us, For anyone who is starting a new army in February, it will be perfect because you can really follow along with us on the blog. But we know that in the real world, not everyone's going to be exactly in lockstep,
This is what I was alluding to in the hobby section, Jeremy. I'm just waiting to February. As we're recording this, it's just around the corner. So I'm ready. I'm amped. But, Alex, who's joining you on this quest for Mantic? Because obviously Ronnie is not painting a 2,000 point army. What poor souls do you have joining you?
Yeah, we couldn't couldn't quite get Ronnie to commit to it. I think he just wants to sort of point to his painted dwarf army and say, "Look, everyone, I've done one army." So Dan Mapleston is joining me. There's also Tobias, who's the Mantic store and events guy and the Pathfinder guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and this is a nice segue, Rob. Actually, we have Ross, who's another new member, and so Ross is actually Mantic's new Kickstarter manager, and he comes from more of a board gaming background. And he has never really, he's like dabbled a little bit in the past with painting some miniatures, but really he's kind of new to this. And this is very important for the challenge. We really wanted to have someone who's completely new, because the idea is, and look, I know Countercharge listeners are people who are, I imagine, the vast majority are kind of the hardcore existing Kings of War players, like you already have armies, you're playing in tournaments, this kind of thing. But my message to Countercharge listeners would be, what's one thing that we all want as Kings of War players? And that's more people to play Kings of War with. So we're really hoping and aiming for this Slow Grow Challenge to be a kind of like an opportunity to bring lots of new people in and to have the existing community kind of galvanized to go out there. And it's like, if you know someone who might be interested in Kings of War, now's the time to bring them in and show them the Slow Grow. And we're all going to start together. And we really want to have a kind of, mentorship and buddy system where it's like, we'd love to see people sharing pictures of like one person's an experienced player and one person's a new player, and the experienced player is kind of buddying up and mentoring with the new player. So on the blog, the rest of us are going to be kind of mentoring Ross along as he paints his first ever army. And we're hoping that out there in the community, people will do the same.
Well, and it's not lost on us that there's no U.S. participation from the Mantic staff. The Rick Hoys and the Kyle Preselinskis. I mean, come on, guys. You guys should step up here and commit.
Bush League, Rob. It's Bush
League.
We say this in all love, but yeah, like you mentioned it, right? There's some things where it's like, it's an oldie but a goodie, right? Or is a saying we have here, or it's a cliche for a reason or whatever. But you mentioned it, the Tale of Four Gamers, or that setup. There's something pure and fun. We've done army challenges in the past, but what I really love in listening to you describe it is not just an army challenge for the sake of an army challenge, but knowing that it's building into that summer narrative event that obviously we know you can't share a lot of details on, but it's like the Slow Go challenge that I'm being involved with. What I have when it's done, I have something that is organized for me then to go into and play with all those painted models. I really like that idea that of a challenge, not for the sake of the challenge, but a challenge with a little bit more direction, or with an end goal. Like there's a final boss at the end of the challenge that you're working towards.
Absolutely, Jeremy. I think you're right. Like, again, it's nice to have that feeling that you're working towards a goal. I think it's nice to have that feeling that you're working alongside other people who are also working towards that same goal. So we wanted this challenge to have both of those. And again, if you start now, and those of us at Mantic who are doing it for the blog, we will be starting from 0 and going to 2,000 points, 500 points times 4, But if someone comes to it late and they only manage to get 1,500 points done, or they only manage to get 1,000 points done, you can still play Kings of War with those points levels, and you still have an army where come the summer campaign, you're up and running and you're able to play games and you're able to participate, So that's the most important thing. I mean, we'd love to see as many people as possible get through the whole challenge and build a 2,000 point army. But even if people only make it half of the way or part of the way, I think there's still a lot of value in that.
So, Rob, what armies are floating in your brain now?
No, they're not floating. It's already concrete. I'm doing halflings, and one of the things I would like to have is an army that's travelable by plane. So I've been thinking about model selection in terms of what are chunky, big, thick models that would take an impact. Normally, I start with like the story behind the army, like what's the purpose of the army, where's it coming from, where does it live in Panathor, and I'm taking a different approach, which is what I want it to look like. You've seen like 100 armies with halflings that are in the middle of the summer. They're harvesting. They're fields of gold and all that. I did for a minute think about, well, that'd be cool to maybe do a winter army. There's so little winter terrain on the table. It would look out of place at most tournaments. So I've settled on fall. And so I'm starting to work on the color scheme. I think, Jeremy, it's one of those things when you're a painter, you go back to the wow that you already know.
Cool colors for you?
Well, it's going to be the warm color scheme, that auburn color that's a pop color in the halfling army that I already have.
Your dwarves are really nice looking, right? That have some oranges.
Yeah,
too.
so it'll be a warm color scheme. And so I'm thinking trolls. And so I'm trying to figure out auburns, oranges, reds, yellows, and that kind of thing. And February 1st, I will take some pictures of some boxes that haven't even been opened. They're stacked up here. And I'm just going to start painting models, stuff that I know we'll use. And then over time, I haven't even thought about the list, guys. I have no idea. I've never played halflings before. So I've been beaten by them a lot. In fact, I've been beaten by trolls, forest trolls, quite a bit. So that's why I think I have an incentive to put forest trolls in the list. Probably will magnetize them so they can have the guns or not have the guns, depending on what I do there. But, Alex, the new halfling models that have come out, the not How to Train Your Dragon, right? Or the fat Dracon sitting in the wheelchair. I mean, I got to have those in the list, regardless of their effectiveness on the table. And that's the thing, Jeremy, that I really want to do is I don't even care if the army is good. I just want to have a cool army. So,
well, you have a lot of great options. I love the stalwarts. I love the juggers. I always love the idea of the heavy armored halflings, right? And I always thought that was a little cool part about the Mantic halflings is they had elements, seasoning of the Tolkien-esque halfling, but also more of the militarized halflings in full plate armor, which I also really loved.
And I don't have to go to my wife and say I have to spend $100
because you got it.
In the pile of opportunity out in the garage, just go down there, open up the bin. There's thousands of halfling models in there.
Well, and it's going to be so cool having seen your your Kingdoms of Half-Men army. It's going to be really exciting to see you take on halflings, but do Mantic halflings.
When I started that army, the winds of change came across and said, by the way, there's a halfling army coming. But at that point, I was like, well, I'm already committed. So I'm painting guys with swords. And the way I look at it, Jeremy, those are half-men. I'm doing halfling. Big difference.
Well, actually, these are halflings, not half men. You know what I mean? So it's the devil is in the details.
Jeremy, you're one to flout really great ideas, but you're short on time and conviction to get things done sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you had that. Maybe they're having a feast.
Yeah.
Take what you will, right? So.
Yeah, I was thinking of doing halflings like feasts or doing them high French Middle Ages because they're from the Kingdom of Croissant, the Duke of Croissant. I always thought, and that will, great idea. I always think fall is such a great basing scheme because usually people do in basing scheme in arming buildings, they stick with the summer, winter, the real polarized, but these in-between seasons, I think can be really interesting when you're thinking about, because I'm doing fall right now for my Ice Elf Northern Alliance army, first snow. And when you're in between seasons, you can have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And the more when you're doing basing, especially multi-basing, which is the piece de resistance of Kings of War, when you can have those basing elements from two different seasons, it's that much more stuff. And nature is varied and chaotic and lots of differences. So I feel like those bases you can really make look engaging and really interesting when you're taking elements from bookend seasons, right? Seasons that are right next to each other.
Really leaning towards maybe a brewing element where they're making hard cider.
Ooh, nice.
It's still early days. I'm going to paint some models first.
I like it. Sounding cool.
Alex, by this point, the blog's out. Talk a little bit about your army.
So I haven't really been coming up with any kind of custom lore or background for the army yet, Rob. But I'll be I think brewing that up as I go. But no, I'm doing Trident Realm actually. My armies I've played most in Kings of War so far are Orcs and Forces of the Abyss. I've got quite big armies for Orcs and Forces of the Abyss in 10mm. And then also basically a 28mm Forces of the Abyss army that I've been working on for a while. I mean, to be fair, my Abyssal 28mm army is still a work in progress, and I still want to add a lot more to it in the future. But yeah, for the purposes of the slow grow and new edition, new year, new army and all that, I was like, well, I want to start something new. I think for me, the new plastic depth horrors and placoderms, when I first saw the pictures of those coming out, even before I'd started working for Mantic, I was like, oh my God, they are so cool. I think they're some of the nicest, plastic models I've ever seen from Mantic, personally. So I was like, because I'd never really had much interest in Trident Realm before that, but when I saw those models, I was like, yeah, that looks awesome. Having said that, those guys will be coming into my army in a slightly later stage because, I am starting with the Champions box for Trident Realm with Axel Tricklebrook.
What a great miniature that guy is.
He's a really nice model. I mean, I am not an expert painter at all. I'm very much a kind of tabletop standard guy. So I hope I can do Axel justice. But yeah, I'll have to think about it. I'm brewing up my color scheme and everything. I'm the sort of person who likes to do a test model or two first, just to see, before I commit to painting loads of models for an army. I kind of want to make sure the color scheme works. So yeah, still in the early stages as this podcast goes live. But yeah, that's me, Trident Realms, and really looking forward to something new.
Doing Champions is kind of cool, though, because you're going to get that unique character that's now in the army list. You almost got me thinking, like, I need to buy the Champions box for our halflings.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, I think, now with 4th edition, where the Champions characters are in the Kings of War army lists, it does really help with that transition where, if you want to start off with a Champions box, you can, and then it's a lot easier to expand it into a Kings of War army. Really looking forward to doing that. We actually have Dan and Tobias are both doing Zakali. Because they just, they both really like the models, and I couldn't persuade them otherwise. So it's like, okay, we'll have 2 Zakali. But in a way, it fits with the narrative because towards the end, we can have a big battle all together where it's like my Trident Realm and then Ross is doing Ogres. So we'll have a big battle where it's like Trident Realm and Ogres teaming up to kind of try and stem the Zakali invasion.
I think it makes sense. 2 Zakali armies invading.
Yeah, because they're invading Mantica right now. So so it fits the theme of where we are in the lore. So that's cool.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense to be taking an army from the new book, though, because that was part of my thinking was these 4 armies probably not going to change that much. The books come out. So by picking one of those armies, I feel like I'm a little safer, like it's a safe bet. Whereas some of the other armies that are slated for future books, it's hard to guess what the future holds. So I'm trying to be a little conservative in that. But Ogres, though, I mean, I can't wait to see Ross's Ogres because the hard plastic Ogres are pretty tasty.
Yeah, they're really nice models. And I think as well, like for Ross, Ogres were just a good, and I've heard you say this on the podcast before, Rob, as well, that like Ogres are just a nice beginner friendly choice. The model count's a little bit lower, and also their play style in the game is fairly straightforward and easy to grasp. So yeah, we sort of gently guided Ross towards Ogres as a choice, but he's really excited about it, and I think he really likes the models as well. So that helps, obviously.
Ogres the only army I can ever win a tournament with. If this dodo bird can win with Ogres, then it does say something to the effectiveness of Ogres.
One thing I wanted to say as well, and going back to that kind of like what Jeremy said about the journey and the tale of 4 gamers, because I think it is, that kind of journey of starting an army and building it over time is just something I think we can all relate to if we've been in this hobby. And there is something exciting about it. I wanted to say, Rob, I think those were some of my favorite Countercharge episodes ever, where a few years ago you got Andy Patton. Kind of you recruited him as a new player and you did a series with him where it was talking about his experience and his journey, and he was building his Empire of Dust army, and he was talking about, well, I went away and had a few games and then I came back and now I'm going to tweak this and tweak that. Yeah, I still remember those episodes. I really enjoyed listening to them. So maybe as part of the Slow Grow, Rob, if you find someone new, we could have a similar kind of new player journey episodes for Countercharge over the next few months.
That's something Jeremy and I have been talking about. We want to get some more voices on. We've been doing that with people that maybe are new to the game and their opinions on 4th edition, but we need to do the same thing for hobby, right?
Because Rob and I talk a lot about, like, we want to provide content. We call them like the Kings of War faithful, right? People who are already at the Church of Kings of War on Sunday morning, right? But also, like, people come and go out of the hobby. You have real life, your jobs, you have kids or whatever. So I think it's also important we think about how do we make the community welcoming for new players. And usually that's through the lens of the game side, but we also need to think about that through the lens of the hobby side too, right? Because I think we take it for granted sometimes. You as a language guy, right? I came up as a language guy too in school. It just becomes a part of you. So miniature painting is a language that I speak, right? It's a language that Rob speaks. But if someone doesn't speak miniature painting and they're asking you, oh, dude, where do I even start with miniature painting? And you're like, okay, well, make sure you get this wet palette and this. And they're like, wet palette? What's a wet palette? Or are you using sable brushes, synthetic brushes? You mean I got to use a certain kind of brush? We forget that sometimes you got to start with the alphabet, right? That miniature painting and hobby, does that resonate with you at all, Rob? What I'm saying?
We're all new at some point. And, sometimes we forget the journey we've been on for 20, 30 years. I love thinking back to that time when you get into it for the very first time, where you walk into that Games Workshop store, you walk into the independent retailer, and you see those models on the shelf, and you're like, huh. It evokes, maybe Lord of the Rings, or it evokes some battle scene from a movie, and you're just like, I don't know why, but I want to do this. When I was a kid, I had G.I. Joes, and every weekend I just set them up in like a battle scene. Like I made a diorama. I'm still doing that 50 years later, right? I'm just painting them now and actually rolling some dice, but we're playing with toys. I try not to lose that perspective.
There's also a sense, too, of privilege. Alex, your journey kind of was similar to mine in that you grow up with this hobby, and then you go to school, and you meet girls, and then you find out these other things. But there's something so magical about it because we return to it, right? For me, it was at the end of grad school. I was so stressed out. I had gone through bad relationships, and I was like, I need something to connect me to something larger than myself, to connect me to a community, to connect me to fellowship, and to allow this expression. And that's what miniature wargaming, I came back to miniature wargaming and painting and the hobby side because of how important that was to my mental health, my physical health, my sense of community. So I think this is a good play. This is a good thing that if you have the ability to take part in, it can really add a lot of benefit to your life.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. And I've always felt like this hobby is a really healthy hobby, actually, most of the time. I mean, I guess like with anything in life, people could take it too far or whatever, and like things can always tip over into being unhealthy. But in general, I think this is a hobby that's really healthy. It has, it fosters creativity and imagination, and there's that social element as well, all of those things we talked about earlier about like with the triangle and everything. And it's something that, for me, it's brought a lot of joy into my life. And like you say, it's good for your mental health. I'm always happier if I look back on times in my life where I've been kind of feeling happy and content. There are always times where I've had time to do the hobby on a regular basis, sit down and paint miniatures and play games with people. And if I ever have a period where I can't do that for a long time, like I feel the impact of it, So, well, yeah, what you said really resonates with me. And then again, that's something I want to share. I want to share that with as many people as possible, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys. It's why you do this podcast. Going back to the slow grow, exactly. I think this is a really good opportunity for us to kind of show that hobby to new people and say, hey, why don't, we're going on this journey. Why don't you come along with us? One thing I'd add as well, like that I think is really important for Kings of War, we've thought about this, with the idea of the slow grow, is obviously Kings of War is kind of a rank and flank, like massed battle kind of game. And I think the spectacle of a big Kings of War game on the table just looks stunning and amazing, and it gets people excited. But the downside of that is that it can look a bit intimidating as well. People can look at Kings of War and think, well, it looks cool, but I couldn't see myself ever being able to paint a big army like that, And I think that's the beauty of the slow grow, where it's like, well, just start small, just your one champions box or your 500 points worth of miniatures. It's only 2 or 3 units, and you can get that done. That is achievable. And also then, once you've got that first little bit painted, you can already start playing some small games with it. That's the other thing. It's like, so I think sometimes people look at a big army and they're like, I can't even start playing the game until I've painted a massive army. But that's another kind of misconception that we want to dispel. It's like, no, there's champions, and Kings of War also works really well at low points values. So if you come along with us, as soon as you've got that first 500 points or so painted, you can already start playing some games, and then you can have both the enjoyment of continuing on with the hobby side of it, while you're also playing some games as well.
Okay, you mentioned the blog. So what other ways can people sort of interact as the challenge is going on? Can they post on pictures on Facebook, or talk to us a little bit about how is the community going to take part in the challenge?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I wanted to mention that. So we definitely want to encourage as many people as possible to get involved. We'd love to see people posting their progress pictures, whether that's work in progress models or when you finished a unit, whatever, really. Just, share pictures of your projects. On Facebook and Instagram, we will have a dedicated hashtag. So that hashtag is going to be hashtag KOW Slowgrow 2026. I know it's a little bit long, but hashtag KOW Slowgrow 2026, all in lowercase. So if you post your pictures on Facebook or Instagram and tag them with that hashtag, we'll see them. Also, we've actually set up a dedicated mailbox for this. So if you're not really a social media kind of person, you can email us pictures and updates directly. So I'll read out the email address for that. That is also KOW Slowgrow 2026 at manticgames.com. So you can email us directly. Now, just to manage expectations, I can't guarantee that we'll be able to reply to those emails. We already receive, quite a high volume of emails, but if you send your hobby updates to that email, I can guarantee it will be read and it will be looked at, even if we're not able to reply to them all. So that's that. And the other thing I would like to suggest as well is, you guys probably know, but there's a Kings of War forum. And that would be another great way of sharing your hobby progress, I think, is to go on the Kings of War forum, which is kowforum.com, and you can create like a hobby thread. There's a whole like showcase section of that forum, and you can create a hobby thread in there, and then you can, essentially update it throughout the course of the 6 months. If you do that and you also put, KOW Slowgrow 2026 in the title, we'll be looking out for it. That's that. We definitely encourage people to share stuff with us. And as we go along, that's one of the things, kind of the nice things we're hoping to be able to do is when people have shared stuff with us, the nice looking armies or any projects where it kind of just that we like, we are aiming to showcase them on our blog as we go. So the blog, I want the blog, the kind of the core of the blog, Jeremy, is going to be like, it's like Team Mantic. It's the four of us who are doing this. It's our progress. That'll be the core of the blog, but I very much want to feature community army and, community progress update and this kind of thing to make sure it's like a two-way thing and it's not just one way,
Let's just say this is completely hypothetical, a question. So not real at all. Let's say you have an army that you've been working on for, let's say, a year and a half. However,
Jeremy, you got to start a new one. You have to start a new one, Jeremy. No, it doesn't count.
That is my question. If you have some ideas percolating, can you bring that in, or do we really need to be starting from scratch, asking for a friend?
So I would say, like, for the purposes of the Slow Grow Challenge, we definitely would like to see kind of new armies being started. And I think as well, like, in terms of sort of featuring armies on the blog, we'd prioritize armies where we can clearly see if someone has shared pictures where they've clearly started from nothing and it's a new army. People who've got half-finished armies, definitely not discouraging them from finishing them off.
I have a great idea, Rob. As you know, as a listener of the show, I struggle with pacing in my painting because I love picking up a single miniature, and my hobby journey over the last couple of years has been, and Rob is an amazing hobbyist, is trying to get my hobby to like that next level. But I've been thinking about, at the age of 45, I only got a certain amount of painting years left in me. So I'm trying to be like, how many more hobbies do I want to do before I go blind?
This might be your last one.
Exactly. This could be the last one. So what I'm thinking is, and I've been talking a lot about this with my local gaming group, Britton, Kyle Timberlake, a bunch of good guys here in California, that if you're going to do, let's say, a speed project or something more designed around how do I make something look good but also be quick, it's good to have that be its own project. Like, you don't want to mix and match in an army, right? Like, I don't want to have my Northern Alliance, which is like my bespoke, Jurassic Park, spare no expense army, right? So I think what I'm going to do for my slow grow is try to show people what can I do with speed paints and with really good basing that's quick, but that the end product looks pretty good. So I think that's going to be my focus, Rob. I don't know what army I'm going to pick yet, but I think my slow grow focus is going to be how far can you push speed paints? How far can you push new player friendly techniques and basing to make something look cool, but that's quick?
Traditionally, you are an output guy.
Yes.
What's the end result? Flip the script and say, what is the input? How can you maximize the efficiency of the input?
No, I think that's a great idea. This will give me a fun project to work on. I can still have the Northern Alliance as my, my Ferrari in the garage that takes me 5 days to change a spark plug. Right, I'll be doing that. But this actually has me excited because I've been wanting to do something speed anyway. Because there's one YouTube channel I really love, Rob. It's called Mediocre Hobbies. Have you ever watched his channel?
Yep.
He does mostly GW stuff, but what he does like the contrast plus method where he starts with a lot of speed paints, but then does a little bit of extra accoutrements to like make it nice.
What you were talking there, Jeremy, about basically doing a new army and focusing it being on more of like it's an achievable tabletop standard and kind of just focusing on like getting it finished within that time frame. I think that sounds absolutely perfect for the slow grow challenge because again, like that like achievability is one of like the key messages of it, if you see what I mean. So it's kind of that to me, just that approach just sounds perfectly matched to the challenge. And that's kind of the approach I'm going to be taking as well. You know, again, I'm not the kind of guy who paints up to try and enter Golden Demon or anything. I like to sort of be like kind of efficient and like, how can I get a nice looking army with the minimum of input, if you see, or like, not the minimum of input because that makes it sound lazy, but you know what I mean, like the right level of input for the output you get. And one thing I would just plug as well a little bit here is, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but well, it was yesterday and Thursday. So by the time this episode goes live, it will be a couple of weeks old. But on the Mantic blog, we did like a community army spotlight. And that was a guy from Germany who has painted like a really nice looking Zakali army. Mm-hmm. But it's really nice looking and it's visually very impactful. But his painting style is very much kind of, it's tabletop standard. And he was talking about it and kind of like the important thing being to just not overthink the process too much and just to do it, just to paint, you know, choose like a bold color scheme and just go for it and that kind of thing. So I think that just fits in really nicely with what you were just talking about, Jeremy.
And Jeremy, I'm going to drop a nugget of knowledge on you.
Oh, drop it.
You should do salamanders. And then now you have the leverage to go to your beautiful bride-to-be and say, I could buy a new army. But really what would be more awesome would be to get myself a resin printer so I can just 3D print a Mantic army for this logo. The justification's there. You just have to seize the opportunity here.
No, I think that's smart. And I really like what you said about that first book. So maybe I'll do that, or maybe I'll do Zerkali because those are new miniatures too. That would be, so you could do halflings, I'll do Zerkali. And then we got to get Matt maybe to do something else.
He'll do all the armies. He's got all the armies already.
I mean, yeah, he's Matt's machine. Whenever it's like our end of the year, what did you paint this year? Rob and I slink. Well, usually it's just me. But Rob joined me in the slinking in the shadows this year.
Your problem of being able to get over the hump of just good enough to get it to that state. We just need to channel Matt because he can I don't think he gives two craps about the output.
He doesn't even paint his rocks. He just puts rocks on the base. What kind of savage? You know, we're not savages here. We're civilized folks.
No, you paint your rocks.
You got to paint your rocks.
Well, let's take another quick commercial break.
Okay, well, just a quick hobby tip. If you're thinking of getting into dwarves, go outside, pick up a couple of rocks. You've got some little obsidian golems right there.
Brilliant. I freaking love it. Cheap.
Just dry brush that.
Don't even have to dry brush.
We're getting too hobby right now. We should probably wrap this up before
they're already painted like rocks. They were made that way outside.
All right, welcome back to Counter Charge. And to close out the show, let's talk about the new version of Dreadball that is coming to Kickstarter very soon. Ronnie, over the last month or so, has dropped not too subtle hints that he has maybe went back into the well of his relationships and found someone from the olden days to put a new coat of paint on Dreadball. Quite a name. By the time you're hearing this episode, it will have already been unveiled. We're recording this before that came out. Alex, you want to share who's going to be helping with the rules for the new version of Dreadball?
Absolutely, Rob. Yeah, it's Jervis Johnson, which obviously is an amazing announcement for Mantic to be able to make. As you say, at the time this episode is going out, that announcement will have happened. So that will be out in the public. But yeah, definitely wanted to just mention it on the podcast as well. I mean, again, I know Countercharge is Kings of War focused, and the Countercharge audience is mostly kind of Kings of War audience. I mean, yeah, hey, if anyone out there is like me, I'm really into sci-fi as well as fantasy. You know, even before I worked for Mantic, I was always interested in whatever new game Mantic would be putting out. So that's something where I'd say, if you haven't checked it out, you know, we've made the announcement. There's blog posts. We've done social posts about it on various different channels. Yeah, Dreadball All Stars, designed by Jervis Johnson, the original creator of Blood Bowl. He's basically the guy who invented that genre of kind of like fantasy sports war games, let's say. So the perfect person to come, as you say, work on Dreadball, make a new version of it. And not just Jervis Johnson as well, but like it's a bit of a dream team because Alessio has been involved in it as well. And the artist Stefan Kopinski. So, you know, 3 icons of the miniature wargaming industry, 3 legends, let's say, and they've all been working together on Dreadball All Stars. But yeah, I would just encourage everyone, go and have a look. If you missed it, you can see on the Mantic blog information about it. You can also, if you just search for Dreadball All Stars Kickstarter, the Kickstarter page is live. You can sign up to follow it. And then the actual Kickstarter campaign is going live on the 17th of March.
And even though it's not Kings of War, Rob, I think we've seen this with Halo, right? When we can bring new gamers into the Mantic ecosphere, it's only good for Kings of War, right? Because it's maybe they want to try a fantasy game or whatever. So I think anytime Mantic has a game system outside of Kings, which is our main squeeze, right? It's still good. We still pick up. There's still it flows down. Rising tides lift all boats, right?
Dreadball was one that's been a popular favorite with a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I think All Stars is a bit of a new spin on it. I personally haven't played it yet because I've been stuck over here in Frankfurt while everyone over in Nottingham is having all the fun. But everything I've heard internally from people who've played it, people who've been involved in the playtesting, is that it's an absolute blast. And I mean, that is what you would expect from someone with the pedigree of Jervis Johnson, really.
A bunch of cool stuff on the radar, right, Rob? Lots of new stuff. This is really exciting. I mean, we've had so much fun in the past with our build an army in a weekend, build a unit in the weekend. So I know along with, as Alex said, the Mantic blog, the Mantic forums, all the Facebook, please use that hashtag on the Countercharge Facebook page. Rob will be doing a slow grow. I will be doing a slow grow. I do not have the Mantic Army Companion open right now in a separate window. Already putting together my machinations. That is definitely not happening. Nor will I, as I am solo with my stepson today, will we be getting into the car and maybe driving to the local game store to pick up some supplies. That will also not be happening today, but thankfully I have a partner who's super supportive of as you see me sitting in my man cave, which may or may not this time next year be a baby's room, we're hoping, but you know, you never know with life. It's so crazy. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to come together as a community to look at the positives of a new edition, right? We've had some thoughts as some of the initial balance stuff works out. But I don't think as a community we've focused yet on the clean slate that a new edition gives you. On the hobby side, right? It's your chance to start a new army, start something new, start that project you've always had in the ether or floating in the orbit of your mind. Now we have an opportunity as a community to come together and get that started. Thank you so much, Alex, for coming on. Any other shout outs or call outs you want to do before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Firstly, yeah, it's been a real pleasure to be here. Like I said, I've been into Kings of War since about 2021. And pretty soon after getting into Kings of War, I discovered Countercharge, and I've been listening ever since. So first shout out would just be to you guys and to all the Countercharge listeners. It's amazing to kind of be here and be on the podcast and feel kind of part of the family now. So that's great. I would also give a shout out to my lovely wife, Mariana, who has been kind of, my main hobby partner these last few years as well. That's been amazing. I would also like to give a shout out to Chris and the Frankfurt Kings group. As I said, I'm going to be leaving Frankfurt and moving to Nottingham soon. Really going to miss playing Kings of War with those guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. And then I'd also say, again, in the German community, a shout out to the Gentleman's Dice Club from Stuttgart. Those are also a lovely bunch of guys, and they've come up to Frankfurt. They've played in some of our ambush tournaments, and they've become really firm friends as well. So I think, for now, those would be my shout outs I'd want to make. Thanks, Jeremy.
Does the Gentleman Dice Club, do you guys all play with monocles and like top hats? Because that's what it sounds like to me.
They don't, but I think they should. Jeremy has decreed it, so it must be so.
What about you, Rob? Any other shout outs?
One of the things that Mantic brings to the table is that worldwide audience, right? And I think that's going to be really great because the scope of this endeavor, is going to be from end to end on this globe. So I'm really excited to see new players, veteran players, relive those moments when we were kids for that first time painting our first army, and remembering why we played with these two soldiers by building a new cool army.
Well, awesome. Thanks again to Alex for joining us. Stay tuned. Watch the space for more details around the slow grow, and also to see what Rob and I are working on, and to see the 7 armies that Matt finishes by the end of the weeks. So, but stay tuned. Lots of awesome stuff coming up. Adepticon is just around the corner, right, Rob? So hopefully life won't get in the way, and we'll both be able to be there and have a lot of details from that event. And as always, remember to keep countercharging.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Countercharge. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at counterchargepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at countercharge15, or by commenting on the Countercharge Kings of War podcast Facebook group. If you enjoy the show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Until next time, keep countercharging. Music is a composition of Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.